the aspect of having core values has been instrumental, not because we're perfect, but when I have made decisions that are not in line with my values, it's so evident to me. Because our core values are not in a 3-ring binder sitting on a shelf in my office. They're emblazoned on our website. They're in our conference room. We talk about it all the time.
This is Task Time Energy, the purpose-filled productivity podcast. I'm your host, Scott Miller. Welcome to the show. Welcome, everyone. Our guest for this episode is my friend, James La Barrie. James is an accomplished entrepreneur who serves as the president of Beyond Marketing. His company is dedicated to elevating businesses of all sizes, from burgeoning family ventures to established major brands. James's career journey began in the hospitality industry on the island of Antigua. He transitioned into professional golf in the U.S. and then achieved a significant career milestone while managing a small skydiving center, which he successfully transformed into a multi-million-dollar venture. Along with his work at Beyond Marketing, James is a podcast host and professional speaker, delivering valuable insights on marketing strategy, customer experience, and the transformative power of word of mouth. James believes that the exceptional treatment of people is the foundation of any successful business, and his life and work definitely exemplify that. So, James, thank you so much for being here today.
Scott, it's my pleasure. Thrilled to be on your podcast.
Yeah, thank you. We were having a conversation the other day that was the inspiration for this, and you started talking about how you started your company, Beyond Marketing, and just started telling the story of how it all began. And I thought it was such a wonderful story about inspiration and values and how that shapes the way that you run your company. And I think that's going to tie into how you lead the people in your organization. And I think this will all just be a really interesting thing for people to hear about. So I'd love for you to tell that story again, as you were starting to tell me the other day about how how you started your company.
I'd be happy to, Scott. I will start by saying values are everything. Everything. And I went to business school and got the old business degree, check. I don't remember talking about core values. I remember talking about P&Ls and making money, or hopefully not losing money. But I don't ever remember talking about core values. And I feel that if it was not emphasized enough. So let me back up. Before I started my business, I worked for another company and I ran it for about 9 years. And you're familiar with that. I was the general manager of a decent sized skydiving center. And after 9 years, man, I was toast. I was toasted. Very passionate, worked tremendous hours, but burnt. And one of the things that burnt me to the core was the culture within the business that I was operating was chaos. And the reason for that, in reflection now of where I am today, I didn't know it at the time, was because of me. The turmoil occurred because of the way I was hiring. I was hiring for a specific skill set, but not thinking about the values of the person or what kind of values alignment they had. I never even thought about sharing my values with anyone. I just assumed that we all sort of shared the same type of thing, like we all want to give great service. Well, sure we do, but not realizing that based on all of our past experiences, we all bring a different perspective. So fast forward to 2012, when I left that company, I resigned knowing I wanted to start this business. And Scott, this is what I would call a crossroads moment. I have goosebumps as I talk about it. And for your listeners, I'm originally from a small island in the Caribbean called Antigua. I was in the Charlotte Douglas airport to fly to Antigua and think about my business plan. and understand that my headspace in the airport was exhaustion and fearful of would this venture work. So I'm in the airport and I go into a bookstore and I see this magazine, Fortune magazine's top 100 places to work. And man, that's resonating with me because I'm coming out of a place that didn't feel rewarded. I felt like a failure, even though we had good success financially. Pull down the magazine, I'm reading through it. And one of the companies is this company that was very obscure to me at the time, Zappos. Now sort of the darling of marketing for the last 10 years. Never heard of it. And I'm reading about this culture that's so rich that there's spontaneous conga line dances forming in some of the call centers. And I'm reading this. I don't know if we can swear on this podcast. But
Yes, absolutely.
yes. And I'm reading this and I'm thinking, bullshit. That doesn't happen at any business. This is good marketing. So, I read about all the other companies, and off I go on my flight. I'm connecting through Miami. And this is the providence. This is the moment that literally changed the course of my life. Was I'm in a bookstore again, and I see this book on the bookshelf, the old business books area. And the title is Delivering Happiness by Tony Hsieh. And I'm like, oh, Tony Hsieh is the CEO of this company that I just read about called Zappos. So I'm intrigued. I pick it up. And Scott, for the time I spent waiting it at my gate and flying to Antigua, I read this thing. It was like one of those things where I'm not a fast reader, but it was speaking to me. And I was just reading voraciously. And after completing the book, after a couple of days, I'm like, if this is real, this is what I want. If I start a business, this is what I want. But I don't want to suffer fools gladly. Is this real? Now, the crazy aspect about this is I had saved up and I was living in an apartment that was $400 a month to save up enough money to have a 6-month runway to start my business. That way, I'm thinking if I never get a client in my agency, in quotation marks, that I'll at least be able to pay for the essentials and survive. Despite having little resources, I was convicted enough by what I read that I flew to Zappos, to Las Vegas, to join a program called Zappos Insights. If I recall, it was like somewhere between $6,000 and $8,000, which was a lot of money for me. And I got to sort of be unfettered behind the scenes, and I was blown away. And I got to spend time speaking with Tony, my business hero. To this day, my business hero, despite his passing. So I return, and what I learned at Zappos was everything that happens in this company that in 2008 had more than $1 billion in sales, everything must be in compliance or in agreement with their core values, even if it results in financial loss. And the stories that I have coming out of that experience being at Zappos, probably too long for this podcast, possibly, unless you want to dig down, but I just couldn't even believe it. I was so inspired. So I return home in my little 2-car garage. I get chalkboard paint and I paint a wall and I write out my 10 core values, which at the time was audacious because it was only me and my values. I didn't even have an employee.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote out my core values. And if you were to walk into now 10 and a half years later, we have a very nice office in our conference room. The same 10 core values that I wrote on that chalkboard are emblazoned on an entire wall. And we as a boutique marketing agency, and we work with small businesses to major corporate brands, I would say that this has been my North Star. What I've learned is that my ethos as a result of my core values is I don't chase money. I do not. Furthermore, the balance that I have in building my team, I who you are is more important than what you know. And I've held on to that. I learned that lesson before of what you know is more important than who you are, and I won't make that mistake again. So when I hire, I'm looking for a values fit. The aspect of having core values has been instrumental, not because we're perfect, but when I have made decisions that are not in line with my values, it's so evident to me because our core values are not in a 3-ring binder sitting on a shelf in my office. They're emblazoned on our website. They're in our conference room. We talk about it all the time. And so it doesn't hold me to a standard of perfection, but it holds me to a standard of higher awareness going, why am I suddenly not enjoying my job because I have a really difficult client? Because it was never a values alignment. And you can tell just whether you choose to acknowledge it or not. So a little bit long-winded there, but I would say that our success as a business and me as a leader in my business is a result of that clarity. It's the North Star. I equate it to the Bill of Rights. You know, it's like the laws of the land are set in the Constitution. That's our North Star as a nation, right? My core values are the North Star of my business.
Would you mind sharing what those values are, what those core values are?
So our core values are have integrity. Our newest one is be an advocate for our clients. So we talk about advocacy where I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to sell people anything. I want to be an advocate. I want to be able to say, hey, this is what you need or you don't need. Deliver amazing service. Be passionate. Think like a consumer. Continually learn. Enjoy the journey and have fun. Be objective. Show gratitude. Offer encouragement. Be humble.
Very interesting. It's really interesting to hear you talk about this because, you know, we met through the skydiving world back when you were the general manager at the skydiving center. And I just remember from the first time I went there, people were talking about the impact that you were having and these new ideas that you were bringing in, you know, because the skydiving world is not necessarily known for its marketing savvy, right? Like some parachute centers are like, hey, like we have an airplane and parachutes, come make a skydive with us. And you kind of like just assume that people are going to find you and want to come and do that, which in many cases is people get away with that. And you brought in all these new ideas and new ways of thinking about things. And I can just remember many, many times people talking about how they were, how impressed they were with what you were doing. And it's interesting to hear you say that among all that success that you made a shift from just thinking about what are we doing and measuring your success by that. Maybe how many dollars are we bringing in? How many more dollars are we bringing in this year than last year? To this focus on values. So you're starting out in your garage, writing down your list of 10 values. No employees yet. How many people do you have working at your company now?
In total, I think we're at 27. 27, that's between full-time, part-time, and contractors.
So clearly the focus on values and not chasing after money has allowed you to grow at least that much to be able to sustain that kind of staff.
Yeah, I still shudder every month when we run payroll. I'm like, I couldn't have dreamed this. And it's sort of a pinch me moment that we have that much money going out, fortunately enough coming in. The irony of it, right, is by focusing on the client and doing right by them, money takes care of itself. Whereas if you're driven by money, you take on clients that you need for your bottom line, but not necessarily the clients that you want, and it never ends well. So it's short-sighted and doesn't result in the money that you want. So it's kind of backwards. And I'll say this, just coming back to Zappos, another major takeaway that I had from that experience was, I'll just tell you this quick story. I got to hear a live phone call from an unhappy customer. She said, I remember vividly, she was, we'll just call her Nancy. She was from Philadelphia though. And I'm sitting with this guy, his name is Mike. And she's like, Mike, I'm an idiot. I ordered 2 dresses from your website. Neither of them fit. But instead of sending both dresses back in their own boxes with their own return authorization numbers, I put both dresses in one box with one return authorization number. So I've only been refunded for one dress. Can you help me? And Michael proceeds like this. Yes, Nancy, I've pulled up your account on the computer and I see the dress you're talking about. I've gone ahead and refunded your credit card $64.12. Is there anything more I can do for you? And this was her response. Wow, you guys are amazing. Literally whispered like she couldn't believe. The response was as fast as I just delivered it. And she goes, I just love you guys. So she hangs up the phone. Now understand that the call center Zappos has 2,000 employees across 3 shifts, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I'm thinking at the call volumes that they get, how many returns do they give back or refunds weekly? So I say that like I'm calculating, like he just refunded $64. Hey, Michael, make me understand this. You don't know if she actually returned the dress. For all you know, she could have been wearing the dress that you just refunded her. How do you justify this? And he's like, we've done a lot of studies on this, and we have learned that, yes, some people do cheat our system, but overall, most people are honest. And what we've learned is that the losses we have when people cheat the system don't even compare to the gains that we get in customer loyalty because we take care of our customers better than anyone else can in our space. He says, we don't offer major discounts at Zappos. We're not a discount retailer. He says, here's what people don't understand, and here's the punchline. He said, we're not a company that sells stuff. And I was like, huh? He sold $1 billion worth of stuff. He says, no, we're not a company that sells stuff. We're a customer service company that happens to sell stuff. And Scott, that like blew my brains away. Like, I'm like, a customer service company that happens to sell. That's sort of my moniker of, I don't chase money. If I do right, I get rewarded. If I do right well. And that was their mantra, and that is based, because of their core values, allows for that. Any other business would go like this. Ma'am, Nancy, let me put you on hold a second. Let me talk to my manager. Or let me call the factory or wherever returns go and find out that they have indeed get 2 dresses in that pack. None of that. Now, I'm a huge Zappos loyalist too. When I was running a marathon several years ago, I needed a pair of running shoes. Call up Zappos, and turns out the guy answering the phone is a running coach. And we spoke for a full hour. Now, what was interesting, Scott, is when I was with Mike, he also told me, he's like, look around. We're in one of their many buildings, call centers. He's like, everyone on this in this call center has had phone calls that last at least 2 hours. Everybody. And I was like, what do people talk about when they want to order shoes or get refunds for 2 hours? He said, look, man, a lot of lonely people in this country, and they just want to talk to somebody. Our policy at Zappos is we never hang up or end a phone call on a customer. We only end the call when they're ready to end the phone call, which is contrary to any other call center, because their goal is, faster sales, got to get off the call to receive the next sale. He says, in fact, the longest call on record here at Zappos is 9 hours.
Wow.
And it never even resulted in a sale. And since then, I think there's been a call that was around 10. He says, look, we're so serious about this customer service approach that let's say you have just flown into the United States and you want to find out what place is open for dinner at 11 o'clock at night, and you don't have Wi-Fi access. Call Zappos. They'll tell you what's nearby. And many people have heard these stories of Zappos before, but what I'm wanting to get across is their values are real and rich. I don't see a lot of advertising for Zappos out there, but the customer loyalty is so strong, and that is not in place if they are not a core values focused business.
In so many ways these days, what you see companies doing is trying to figure out, how can we get as much money from the customer while spending as little as possible on our end? Right. And that's like that seems to be the golden rule, the golden formula. You go to the supermarket and you go to buy a bag of chips, and the bag of chips the label is carefully printed so that you don't see that actually only a quarter of the bag is full. So you're looking at, oh, look at this big bag of chips I'm getting. No, there's only like a quarter of that full. And then it's full of air, so you can't actually tell, right? So there's so many examples of this where we see this. And yet you're talking about a company that's doing exactly the opposite, that's focusing on values and being wildly successful. And I often think about this. I often wonder about this. How many companies would be successful in doing it this way? Because you're going to stand out in this sea of like mediocrity, and let's just get as much money as we can from the customer or the client, when you are doing the kind of things that Zappos is doing, that you're doing with Beyond Marketing. There seems like such an opportunity there to stand out. And it sounds like it's working. Like, it sounds like that's like the whole point here, is that you can do this and it does work.
I do consulting with various businesses as well as marketing presentations as a speaker. And when I do teach, I feel, especially when I teach about marketing and I teach about core values and the importance of them, I almost feel like the room glazes over. Like, what does this have to do with marketing? Core values. And I have to sort of emphasize, like, listen, everyone, particularly if they're entrepreneurs, like, I know you want to get to the thing, that magic bullet of marketing that's going to bring you more business. This is the magic bullet. This is the thing. Don't glaze over. I know that we hear in HR about core values, but this is everything. What does core values have to do with marketing? Everything. Everything. By the way, just to pivot off of that, I started writing down the businesses that I'm loyal to, the businesses where I might actually spend a little bit more money, but I'm loyal to them and I'll spend a little bit more with them. And I started looking up if they had core values. Every single company that I was loyal to is a core values-based business. Costco, I'm diehard Costco. If you read about their CEO and how that started, the core values. Delta, diehard Delta. I'm in a city where American Airlines is the hub. American will never get $1 from my dying grubby hands for the way that they have treated me. But Delta, not perfect, but takes care of me when things are wrong. Core values based. Enterprise Rent-A-Car. I've never had a bad experience with values based. You go down the line. Zappos, values based. Patagonia, very values based. So much so that it's a head scratcher. A few years ago, I was blown away by this in terms of marketing. It was audacious, Scott. It was something like basically attacking the president, because during the time Trump was selling off public land for, drilling oil. And Patagonia was on the homepage of their website, big lettering, the president has stolen your land. And it's like, that from a business standpoint is crazy, particularly as divided as this country. Think about how many customers they lost because they took a political side. That's core values. That's a values-based company.
What's coming across is this idea that you are going to lose. There is risk involved in this approach. You are maybe going to lose some money because you stick to your values. Maybe Zappos does lose some money because people rip them off. But on the whole, you're gaining much more because people respect the values, because they appreciate the way they're treated. Patagonia, I know, is extremely popular. And maybe, yeah, they did lose some people for taking that political stand. But I know that people who talk about Patagonia, not just the quality of their products, but people talk about their values and what the company stands for. So it seems like it's again that, are you going to cling to your fear of what you might lose, or are you willing to take a chance on what you're able to gain?
Here's an interesting case study. You're right. The thing with Bud Light, in the stance that they took, was it a values-driven aspect or was it a marketing-driven approach? Now, with Patagonia, they were unapologetic with their approach because their stance in stating the president stole your land is in line with their values and taking care of the environment. Bud Light's getting slammed with loss of revenue, but they're not holding the line. They're like, fire that marketing guy or gal or whoever was involved. Backpedal, 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 backpedal. Now, I don't know what the values are of Anheuser-Busch or whoever owns Bud Light. I'm not that invested in it, but I've been curious to say, okay, now you're under public scrutiny. You took a stance. Are you following through? Are you not? Part of me wonders, are you losing revenue by those that don't share the values that Bud Light stood for? And now because you are backpedaling, are you also losing the loyalists who don't appreciate that you're not holding to what they thought was a certain value?
Right. Well, if it is values based, you're not going to backpedal on it when you get some backlash for it. I mean, I think that's part of having values that are actually genuine values, authentic values, is you're willing to stick with them even when there's backlash. And that sounds like, I know a little bit about the Bud Light situation, but I do remember hearing something about them making that stand and then backpedaling on it, like you're saying, which makes it seem more like just a marketing ploy and not really values, right?
That's it. I think when you have values, you generally are not trying to please the masses, but you take a stance for something. And so, look, I don't want to pretend that I am perfect and almighty. And look, when you are seeing major revenue like Bud Light is seeing in extreme losses, like someone's going to lose their job if there's not a course correction. But how you handle that, I question. I mentioned earlier, I've taken clients that I regret. It wasn't a values fit. But I've learned, and I've learned some hard lessons by going, losing sleep as an entrepreneur at night, going, I'm feeling so much stress because I cannot please a client that cannot be pleased. And I knew it. I saw the red flags. So for me, core values is everything. I don't think we would be where we are. A big aspect, too, that should be mentioned with core values is your culture. I'm now, because I'm hiring based on who you are, not what you know, the culture within is so much more. I love coming to work. I love working with my team.
This is one thing I'm noticing from a very practical standpoint. We talk about energy. I mean, that's one of the things we talk about in this podcast. And, when I'm coaching people who want to improve their time management skills, we always say this is one of the dimensions you have to think of. You just can't think of the tasks that you're doing and the time you're doing them in, but the energy that you're going to put into it. And it's just so clear in listening to you and seeing you here that how long have you been running Beyond Marketing?
10 and a half years.
10 and a half years. And you're talking about what you're doing after 10 and a half years and your job with this much energy and this much enthusiasm, right? And it seems to me like there's maybe some connection there between this values-based leadership and this values-based company, and the fact that you're this excited to talk about it after 10 years, right?
If you have any listeners that felt the way I did, which was, even as the leader of the last business I was at, driving to work in dread, literally feeling knots in my stomach of dread because of what I created. No one else, me. And now, 10 and a half years in, you hear my passion, my enthusiasm. I love coming to work. Some days are tough. I'm not going to try and pretend that it's perfect. But when I look at it from 10,000 feet looking down on what I'm doing, I love it. It's night and day. What changed? What's the variable that changed between me before being the leader of a business and loathing it to now? I have clarity. Clarity in my values, for sure.
That seems like one very practical result. Another one I'm wondering about, and this is me testing a theory here. So one of the things that people often struggle with when they're good at doing things, right? So someone who's been a very successful individual contributor, or someone who's been very successful, maybe running their own business, but doing their own thing, and then having to make that shift to a leadership role, where now your job is not to do the thing, but your job is to help others do that thing, right? I mean, sometimes you have to step in and get your hands dirty, but really as a leader, there's a significant shift there in how you approach your work that a lot of leaders seem to struggle with. And I'm wondering, in what way has your values-based approach helped with being a leader of an organization with these people working for you?
Empathy. With having core values, I have clarity of what I want, who I should hire, who I should work with. But now that they're when we talk about what our values are, be passionate, have integrity, be objective, show gratitude, offer encouragement. That's not just like the core values that we should have with our clients. It's the core values I should have with my employees. And I have great empathy from my experiences before of going, gosh, I feel like I'm doing a really good job, but what motivates me? It's not my paycheck. I need money to live. I would like to be compensated appropriately, but that's not what drives me. And so the reason why one of our core values is show gratitude, offer encouragement, those are two separate values, is because that's what I need. That is actually part of my values. And if I need that, it's likely that the language of others, I have certain team members who really need that positive reinforcement. Even though I've told them that they're doing a good job, just continually coming back. We have this thing in our office called most praise. Hashtag most praise. We even have a little sort of one of those red staples buttons. Instead of it saying no problem, whatever their slogan is, it's recorded. And when you click on it, it says it's actually our team members singing most praise. And so, sorry to your listeners that had to hear that. Whenever someone does a most praise, a good job, we celebrate together and we hit that button and it's most praise. We also have a vestiboard. I don't know if you're familiar with a vestiboard. It's almost like, how do I describe it? If you've ever been to Europe and the train system that shows departures and arrivals of the train, and it's one of those flapper things. We have a vestiboard is sort of a sign that has flapping letters. And if someone does a job well done or we get a positive review, we show encouragement and praise to the team member on the board publicly in the office. So just continually offering encouragement. Like, it's not like, yeah, of course you need to offer encouragement. No, this is a real core value, and I really want to show gratitude.
When you talk about something like that vestiboard, I could totally see that being something that a company tries to implement and it failing completely. Because it seems like there are things that companies try to do that are not successful because they're not connected to core values, right? You can't just put a coat of paint on something and expect it to work. You have to have the real substance underneath. So I guess what I'm getting at is it sounds like it's the core values that drive what you're doing that makes these things successful. Not that it's the latest, coolest thing. Not that you went on Instagram somewhere and saw a post about Vesta boards and said, okay, that's what I'm doing now. It's the core values that drive the decisions to implement these things that make them successful, and not the other way around.
Mm-hmm. It's true. 100%.
But just to shift gears a little bit, we were talking about something right before we started recording, and you shared something which is very relevant to the time management theme of this podcast. You were talking about something different that you started doing and that worked really well for you. Would you mind sharing that?
I'd love to. And I'm so glad we're segueing, because I've been worried. This is a podcast mostly about time management, and we're 36 minutes in, and we're just now getting around to that.
But I think, just to pause that, I have to pause that. I got to jump in and push back, because really this is what I tell people, whether it's with coaching or whether it's with this podcast. It's not about getting as much done as possible in a day. It's about being satisfied with how you spent your time. That, I think, in my own experience in working with people, coaching people, all the things that I've done, at the end of the day, you can get everything done on your to-do list and not be happy with how you spent your day. But yet, if you do a certain number of things, but they're aligned with your core values, that can be a great day. So that's why I think this is a really exciting conversation to have. And I'm excited about sharing this with people.
Yeah, for sure. So for those listening, I actually attended a time management workshop with you, Scott, about 2 weeks ago, I guess. And I really need time management is my Achilles heel. I am a workaholic, and I love my work, but I'm also married. And having balance is a constant struggle for me, because I'm trying to be a good husband, but within my business, I feel a tremendous push-pull all the time. The push-pull is between working on my business, working in my business, taking care of my team. And I do a lot of phone calls. We're very high touch. And so, yeah, I'm frustrated a lot. And I've never really had a good system. My system for my to-do list has been my little black book where I write stuff down. But it's not in order, like in terms of priority and what's most important and what needs to be. And so when I start a new day, I rewrite the to-do list from the page earlier from the day before. It's very tedious. So I think I've had a breakthrough. I use a project management tool called Monday.com, and I've started putting my to-do list there. And what I learned from your course was have a to-do list for today that's secondary, if you will, to the overall to-do list. And what I've been doing is, I'm sure some of your listeners are going to sort of eye roll going, that's not even revolution. It's revolutionary to me. So I'm able to change or show statuses on this board, if you will, we'll call it. And so on my board for things to do today, what I started doing is prioritizing. This is of greatest importance, medium, low. And since our call and implementing this in Monday, everything that was on low just wasn't getting actually done, because I was running out of time and I didn't feel great pressure. But that thing that's low priority, day after day after day is not getting addressed. So I noticed this and I feel frustrated, because I'm that guy that's got to put a highlighter through that thing, like a check mark or line through. I got it done. Now I'm starting to go, all right, yes, I'm putting things in priority, but I'm going to have a status bar that shows where in my calendar it's actually going to happen. I'm going to time block this stuff. And I've time blocked before, but not been real consistent. So to give you an example, Sunday night of this past week, I'm looking at already all my things going on for the week, all my scheduled meetings. And I know that you said put 6 things on your to-do list for, I'll say, for today. Well, I started realizing that even though I might have 6 things, I don't have enough time because I'm actually starting to time block them into my calendar and start recognizing, wow, I really don't have time for the 8 things or the 7 things. This is actually what I have time for. And that has resulted in high productivity and greater satisfaction. I knew that I had a task that needed to get done, high priority, and when I was trying to time block it, I'm like, I got no time. So it's like, but it has to get done. I got to come in at 7 a.m. Get that done. Boom, boom, boom. I'd say this week I've been more productive with this very simplistic system than I have in 10 years with zero exaggeration. And I'm leaving going, oh, I got everything done that I wanted to get done because I actually time blocked it. And it's not that I've time blocked off of my little notepad, but without showing hierarchy of importance or how much time it's going to take to do each of these tasks. It's been kind of game changing, Scott, and I thank you for what I learned, because it's been very practical. And I've had to tinker to make it work for me because I'm a very visual person, but it is really great. And also having a second to-do list separate from work, that's my personal stuff that I want to get done as well. Super great.
Tell me if I've got this correct. It sounds like a big change you made was from having maybe time blocked to really thinking specifically about what you were going to do during that time and how much time it was going to take. And that combined with the prioritization and paying attention to those things that were low priority that just kept getting kicked down the road. Is it that combination and getting real clarity about those specific things that made the difference? Is that correct?
Yeah. Basically, I was put more on my to-do list than could get done. And so the low priority stuff was never getting done because each day something of greater priority was taking its place. But so basically the progression went from writing it down for the last 10 years in a black notebook, sometimes I would lose, to getting it onto a digital screen where I can drag and drop stuff around, putting categories of prioritization, but then also putting a status bar of, has it been scheduled in my calendar or not? And that has made, I have to, if anyone's eye rolling listening to this, I apologize. You've probably been doing it this way for many years, but look, I've done the Michael, I can't remember what thought leader is on time management. He's got a book and his kids, gosh, I can't remember his name, but needless to say, 40 minutes in your workshop is what did it versus many, many books. So I'm a happy guy.
Excellent. I'm glad that was helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and the interesting thing that you're saying, which I think is it's so easy to underestimate how effective simple changes can be, because there are these things that I think we're not doing because we think they're so simple. We think it's simple enough that it's just going to happen automatically, or that it's just almost too minor for us to really have any impact. But then when we start looking at those things that we're not actually doing and actually making them more, I often talk about doing things mindfully and intentionally. So rather than just letting some of these things happen on autopilot, we actually start focusing on them mindfully and intentionally. And then suddenly we realize that these things that we were neglecting because it just didn't seem important enough to focus on actually makes a big difference. I think that happens a lot when we make a change and say, well, this is so simple. Why didn't I do this years ago? I think it's because it's very easy to underestimate the impact that some of these changes can have.
The author is Michael Hyatt. And yes, it's I think that's where I feel a bit silly, is that it's so simple. The change that I made was pretty minor, but the outcome has been really game changing, because the level of satisfaction I feel going, I did what I set out to do because I knew how much time I had to do it. That's simple. As opposed to, this is what I got, there's a long list, on single space paper of all the things I got to do. And you just feel this frenetic energy, this nervous energy of, you might be talking to one of my employees, and you're speaking with them, but in the back of your mind going, I need to get on with it. And I don't want to be that way.
Yeah, and I think there's an aspect of that of being more realistic too, having a more realistic view of whatever it is that's holding you up, whether it's a more realistic view of how much you can actually get done in a day, a more realistic view of how long things are going to take. Somehow, when we make that shift that lets us look at things more realistically, that's where these great things happen. Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad that was helpful.
Super helpful. For a while, I've been wanting to, I host a podcast presently and getting ready to do a second one. And for those that know how busy I've been, many have thought, hosting a podcast is madness. To even try and do two is even crazier. But I am learning. I've heard many people say, look, if you really want to do something, you'll make the time. You'll find the time. And I've sort of been in the headspace. There's no way I could possibly find more time, but I am. And so I'm able, in me working on my business, and working in my business, I have these passions that I want to do. And that's where I feel frustrated is there's stuff I want to do beyond this stuff. And now I'm starting to see the light. Like, yeah, okay, now I'm seeing that I do have, because I'm more efficient. I know that with the time blocking, I've got 1 hour to get this task done before I do get on to the next thing or the next meeting or whatever. Once an hour is surpassed, whereas before I wasn't really on top or have total clarity of how much time I had to work with. So it's much more efficient.
Sounds like in some ways you're allowing yourself to limit your time on certain things and saying, I have an hour to do this. It's going to get done in an hour, even if it feels like I could spend 2 hours on it, which is, if you're doing a little bit of that can be extremely valuable.
An example today on my status is I didn't get one of the tasks done that I wanted to get done, but the status is working on it. And now I have to schedule in another time to finish it. But I started. Sometimes I'm so overwhelmed by a long to-do list, like it's almost arresting, like, God, where do I even begin? And I need headspace. Sometimes I feel like I've taken on this role as quote unquote, and I think this will resonate with folks, where the only time I would ever get things done is either very early in the morning or after everyone's gone home, because I need uninterrupted focus time. But now I'm building it into my calendar. I as opposed to just sort of socializing or having coffee with everyone, blah, blah, which we still do, but I know what my time blocking is, and I don't want to work late. Been doing that my whole life. So taking control, getting a little bit of greater awareness, I think that's it, is my awareness levels of the actual time I have are greater, and I'm knuckling down to utilize it efficiently.
That's great. Yeah, that sounds like an exciting change.
Yeah, it truly is. I feel like I'm an advertorial for you right now, and that is absolutely not the case. It really has. That small class has really helped me a lot. That workshop.
Good. I'm glad. That's awesome to hear. That's what I want to hear. So I want to be respectful of your time, James. I appreciate you taking the time today to meet and talk. I would like to ask you a question. That I always ask people at the end of these podcasts, which is, what is your dream right now?
Oh man, Scott, that's a big one. I got a lot of dreams. My dream right now is to travel more. My wife and I have identified in the next 10 years, like, our parents are aging. The freedom that we have to move right now might be restricted because we have to take care of them. We've already started writing down the places we want to go. We're dreaming about that. I'm dreaming about starting an entrepreneurial course for entrepreneurs. I'm really excited about it. Sharing with them, like, lesson 1, core values. What does this have to do with your businesses and market? Everything. I really want to get into that. I'm dreaming of another podcast. I do a skydiving focused podcast presently, but I'm wanting to do an entrepreneurship focused podcast. I'm dreaming about that. I really enjoy it, listening to people's stories and their journeys. I am daydreaming or dreaming about doing some Hobie Cat sailing in Antigua in December.
Excellent.
I'm a dreamer. I got a lot of dreams and things that I want to do. It's an exciting time. I just want to say that, and maybe this might resonate, is, life is difficult. We're all extremely busy. But I can say that, look, life isn't perfect. I have stressors, I have worries, but I am happy. I have my health. My family has their health. And Scott, as we think about time management, and I can't really quite explain this, but since I was the age of 13, and it might be because that's when I left home, but I've always had a high awareness of time in terms of how limited it is. Life is fleeting. I'm 45 right now, Scott. I was 25 a few minutes ago. I swear. And so when I think about dreaming, I'm aware that I don't have much time to dream. And I really want to get after those dreams because I feel myself ticking up. Not thinking, though, that I'm ticking up to be 90. I don't know how much time I have left, but I'm not taking that for granted. I think about my parents all the time in terms of I see them usually twice a year. And every time I see them, and like it's like the things that might annoy you, I don't let annoy me anymore, because is this the last time that I get to spend with them? So all that being said, and this even comes back down to time management in order to enjoy the time that you have, coming back down to values in terms of perspective. Like, I don't want to work like crazy and then die. What I do think, sometimes I'm conflicted with this in terms of legacy. Should you be thinking about legacy? That's a bit self-centered. But I do feel like my time on earth is limited, and I don't want to just be consuming. I do wish to make this world better in the realm of which I can make it better, whether it be with my employees or my business or my clients, the time that I have with my family. So it's a bit of a ramble, but yeah.
There are a lot of inspiring things in there that I think that are going to resonate with different people in different ways, and there's so much in there about how to and that's really what this podcast is about, right? Getting people to think about how we're using our time, and are you using it in the way that you want to? And it sounds like you've given that a lot of thought, and it sounds like you're finding ways to do that, to use your time in the way that is meaningful to you. So thank you for sharing all of that. That's very, very inspiring. And someday, James, you and I are going to end up on a Hobie Cat together. You can have the captain seat. I'll get out on the trapeze, and we need to go zoom around a lake or a bay somewhere. And that needs to happen.
Scott, I would love that, but I don't want to be in the captain seat. I'm untrained. I have no formal training. I just go, if I tighten this here, that makes me feel faster. Cool. Oh no, I'm losing efficiency. Let's release it's very informal.
I think that sounds to me like the way you sail a Hobie Cat. Well, James, thank you so much. Before we go, I would love for you to let people know how to find you, how to learn more about what you're doing, your podcast, your business. Can you share some of your details?
Yeah. So the name of my business is Beyond Marketing. The web address is beyondmarketing.xyz. I do certainly a lot of consulting, coaching in the realm of marketing and business. And I should mention, the Beyond and Beyond Marketing is very purposeful. We are a digital marketing agency, but the Beyond is connection. My philosophy on marketing is Word of mouth is the most powerful form of marketing. How do you get word of mouth? You exceed expectations by treating people better than they ever expected to be treated. Wow, that feels good, and that gives me purpose. I want people to feel important and special and taken care of and seen and validated. I run a digital marketing. I don't care about data. I mean, I do. It's important, but it's not what makes me come alive. Let's dig it down into the customer journey and go, how do we make people feel special at every touch point if we can? Because the sum total of that is going to be someone that goes, wow, someone's paying attention to the details. That lights me up.
Yeah, can see that. That's excellent. And your podcast?
The podcast is a skydiving focused podcast. It's called the 20-Minute Call. And that is basically learning people's journeys. Why are people jumping out of airplanes? What makes them tick? Who are they? And then the new one that I'm developing is called the Entrepreneur's Journey, and coming soon.
Excellent. Well, I will share links in the show notes to those if you'd like me to, and that way people will be able to find that easily. James, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for everything you've shared. It's been really entertaining and energizing and inspiring to hear you talk about all this.
Cheers, Scott. Thank you.
James mentioned a time management workshop he recently attended, which gave him some new ideas about organizing and prioritizing tasks. That workshop is called Task, Time, Energy, the Workshop. It's a free 1-hour online workshop that I run every month. To sign up for that workshop, go to my website, scottmillercoaching.com. If you're wondering what the dogs are doing, Bug's butt is much better. I won't go into too much detail about that, but Bug is doing just fine, and Maple is too. That is all we have for this week. See you back here next time.